Hello again, this is Corey Barnett of the Cartersville Church of Christ, and this is another edition of Corey and Kids. When we do Corey and Kids, we start off with the books of the Bible. I would ask you how many are in the Old Testament. You would tell me 39. I would ask you how many in the New Testament. You would tell me 27. And if I asked you how many books total are in the Bible, you would tell me 66. That's right, 39 in the Old, 27 in the New, 66 total. Let's say the books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, the 39 books of the Old Testament. To the New Testament now: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation. And 27 books in the New Testament plus the 39 of the Old gives us the 66 books of the Bible. For this edition of Corey and Kids, I want to talk about something that I really enjoyed when I was a child. I would go with my daddy or my granddaddy, or I called him Uncle Ralph, who was my great uncle. We would go to different creeks in southern Middle Tennessee, and we would wade those creeks while we fished. The reason for that was we would go out and we would find these creeks where you could get into the water and you could advance upstream or downstream, whatever the case may be, and find what we considered different holes. What I mean by that was fishing holes. And we would fish in those particular holes for a while, and as long as the fish were biting, we might stay there. And if the fish stopped biting, we might move on down or move upstream, and we might find another hole and fish there for a while. A lot of my childhood memories that I enjoyed were done on occasions where I was fishing with one of those gentlemen. And I am privileged to be able to still be a fisherman to this day. But it is not necessarily the type of fisherman you might be thinking about right now. Because when I enjoyed that physical fishing as a child, I didn't understand the fact that one day I would be a spiritual fisherman as well. I want to read for us in Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. And I want you to see that when Jesus picked out his first 4 apostles, they were fishermen. Again, this is Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw 2 brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other 2 brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets, and he called them. And they immediately left the ship and their father, and followed him. Again, Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. Now back then, as you were able to deduce from what I read, they used nets quite often in the fishing that they did. And what they would do is they would throw that net out and bring it back in, and however many fish were caught by the net, that was their amount that they received on that particular occasion. Now, the way I fished as a child, I used a fishing pole, like many of you probably have. And of course, for it to be effective, to be able to catch what you want, which is a lot of fish, you have to have the proper equipment, you have to have the proper bait, and you have to have, sometimes more importantly, and maybe even in some of the other things, you need patience. Because if you don't have patience with fishing, you might not last very long. There were some days when the fish would bite very well, and those days were a lot of fun. But then there were other days maybe where the fish did not bite as well, and it might not have seemed as enjoyable. But keep in mind, if you still have the right equipment, you still have the right bait, and if you're willing to put forth the amount of patience, even a bad day fishing is still a pretty fun day. Nonetheless, when it comes to spiritual fishing, we also need to make sure that we are using the right bait. Now, when I say that, keep in mind, we're not fishing for a largemouth bass or a bluegill or anything of that nature. We're trying to do like Peter and Andrew and James and John. We need to become fishers of men. And friends, the only way we're going to be able to bring in, if you will, after we cast our nets, a large amount of fish is if we take out the right bait, or we take out the right net, in this case, I guess would be more appropriate, and we put it out there so that we can use it to bring in the men. Now, when I was fishing, I like to use a worm. Of course, worms are a very popular form of bait when it comes to fishing, and a lot of times you'll get different types of fish that will bite after a worm. But there is one in particular thing when you're a fisher of men that you need to use if you're going to catch men. That is the gospel. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, Romans 1:16. You see, the same thing is used to catch no matter who it is, no matter where he is. It is the same thing used to catch men today, the gospel of Jesus Christ. We need to go out there and tell as many people as we can the good news about what Jesus has done for us, that he came to this world, put on flesh, died as a sinless man, shed his blood for the remission of sins, was buried, rose again the third day after his death, and he has ascended back on high, never to die again. Friends, we need to let people know about that and how they can be saved. Because one day, I hope children who watch things like the Corey and Kids programs that we're doing, I hope one day they're going to want to be obedient to the gospel as well. We need to teach them that they need to believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, John 8:24. We need to tell them they must repent of their sins, Luke 13:5. We need to let them know that they need to confess Jesus as Christ before men, Matthew 10:32 and 33. And when they've told the world they believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, they need to be baptized for the remission of their sins, Acts 2:38 and 1 Peter 3:21. Friends, we have some good news, but we have to go fishing to let the men hear it. I hope that when you go out fishing, especially when it comes to fishing for men, that you'll catch a net full. This has been another edition of Corey and Kids. Till next time.